The auctioneer's voice cracked through the dust-choked square. $6 for all three. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. It was 1872, and Redemption Creek was the kind of town where a man's coin marked his worth, and a stranger's stumble filled every porch with gossip. Folks pressed close, not for cattle or horses, but for the three Apache women roped together on the rough plank stage. Their wrists were bound, their hair tangled from the ride, yet they stood tall. Their beauty and defiance showed even through dirt and humiliation. The rancher who raised his hand was Samuel Carver. 10 years had passed since his wife Mary was buried under the crooked oak behind the ranch house. He had carried loneliness like a second skin, raising 2 children in a land with no mercy for widowers. At 36, his shoulders bore the weight of years in the fields, his eyes sunken but steady. He was not a man for wasted words, yet when he called out, "I'll pay the 6," silence fell heavier than the moment before a duel. Heads turned. A blacksmith spat. A saloon girl smothered laughter with her hand. The sheriff, leaning on a hitching post, gave a long whistle. Buying 3 Apache women, enemies to settlers, was madness. And doing it for so little made the whole business sting sharper. Still, Samuel stepped forward, parting the crowd until he reached the edge of the platform. The women's eyes locked on him. One pair burned with fury. Another brimmed with sorrow so raw she seemed ready to collapse if not for the rope binding her. The third studied him longer, her gaze sharp, searching for something she had not seen in the men who had jeered. The auctioneer thrust out his ledger, eager to be done. Samuel dropped 6 silver coins on the wood. Their ring echoed like judgment. He signed his name in slow strokes. It was more than a purchase. It was a promise he could not yet name. "Crazy fool," someone muttered. "What you gonna do, Carver?" Another called. "Tame wildcats in that shack of yours?" Laughter followed, uglier now. Samuel ignored it. He had long known that men with too many words often had little worth saying. The auctioneer cut the rope and shoved the women forward. They stumbled but stood straight again. Samuel caught the first woman by the elbow. She jerked away, chin lifted high. For a breath he admired her pride more than he pitied her pain. His children would not understand. They had begged him for help, for someone to ease the burden left by their mother's death. He had searched months, finding only refusals or women unwilling to take on another's young. Then he had seen these 3 dragged into town like spoils of war. Something shifted in him. Not pity alone, not desperation, but the conviction that within them lay the strength his children needed, and maybe a chance for more than survival. The women followed as he led them away. The crowd parted with sneers and whispers. Children pointed. A drunk shouted a joke until Samuel's hand drifted near his revolver. Silence dropped quick as thunder. They walked together through the dust, 1 rancher and 3 bound women beneath the pitiless sun of Redemption Creek. At the edge of town, Samuel stopped. The auctioneer trailed close with the papers. "Cut the ropes," Samuel said. The man stared. "What? You'll never keep them docile if—" "Cut them!" Samuel's voice carried steel. The auctioneer hesitated, then drew a knife. The bindings fell. The women rubbed their wrists, their freedom shocking the crowd more than the purchase itself. Gasps spread. A few cursed, predicting Samuel's death before night. Yet none of the women ran. They stood rooted, eyes fixed on him, caught between suspicion and disbelief. Samuel tipped his hat. His voice was low, firm. "You walk free beside me now. My ranch is out yonder. You'll have food, a roof. My children need care. That's the truth." The sharp-eyed woman narrowed her gaze. Then, in broken but clear English, she asked one word. "Why?" It was the first sound from their lips all day. The crowd erupted in shock. Samuel felt their eyes burn into him, but he did not falter. "Because I know what it means to lose," he said. "And I know what it means to fight for something worth keeping." The words hung heavy. Samuel mounted his horse and gestured for them to follow. They followed him, not out of trust, but because something in his voice carried more weight than the crowd's jeers. By the time they reached the ridge above his ranch, the prairie sun was sinking red into the horizon. The house below stood plain but sturdy, its windows glowing faint with lamplight. 2 children ran out when they saw their father crest the hill. They froze at the sight of the women behind him. Fear flickered in their eyes, but beneath it lived a fragile hope. For the first time in years, Samuel Carver felt the weight of change pressing on his shoulders. He had invited danger into his home, yes, but maybe salvation too. The town thought him a fool. Perhaps he was. But fools sometimes carved new trails where wiser men built fences, and Samuel had never been one to live behind a fence. The ride home was long, silence heavier than the dust clinging to their clothes. Samuel led on horseback, the women walking behind. They were unbound but weary. Each time he glanced back, he found steady steps, guarded faces, and eyes fixed ahead. He wondered if they saw him as a rescuer, a captor, or simply another man who believed he had the right to claim their lives. Maybe all three. When the ranch finally came into view, the setting sun painted the hills molten red. The small house sat at the center of tilled soil and ragged fencing worn thin by years of weather. On the porch waited his children, a boy of 12, a girl of 10. They had been watching the road as they always did when their father rode to town. Their excitement faltered into unease when they saw the three women. The boy's eyes narrowed, hand twitching toward the shotgun propped against the rail. The girl clutched the doorway, unsure. Samuel raised his hand before either could speak. "They're with us," he said firmly. "They'll stay here now." The children traded a long glance. Silence stretched until the girl whispered, "Are they dangerous?" "They're people," Samuel answered. He tied his horse and dismounted. "Same as us. They'll eat at our table tonight." His tone carried authority but not ease. His son's gaze stayed hard, sharpened by years of hearing tales of Apache raids. Samuel knew those stories too. He knew the whispers in town and the risk of bringing these women under his roof. Inside, the house was modest. One main room with a wide hearth, a rough table, shelves lined with jars of beans, corn and preserves. The children had cleaned earlier, a ritual whenever their father returned. Now they stood back, uneasy, as strangers crossed their threshold. The tallest woman entered first, chin high despite the dirt. The second lingered close, her eyes quick and wary. The third, the one who spoke English, followed last. She touched nothing, but her gaze swept every detail. The worn rug by the fire, the photographs of Mary Carver on the mantel, the empty rocking chair where Samuel often sat in silence. Samuel set bread on the table, ladled stew from the pot, and motioned for them all to sit. The children obeyed slowly, sliding onto the benches. The women remained standing, tense as though expecting a trap. At last, the English speaker murmured something to the others, and they sat across from the children. The meal passed with little talk. Only the clink of spoons broke the silence. Samuel studied each face. His daughter's eyes softened, curiosity peeking through her fear. His son stayed rigid, jaw tight. The women ate cautiously, never letting their guard slip. Halfway through, his daughter reached for the bread and pushed it toward the second woman, who had eaten the least. The woman's eyes widened, then softened. She gave a small nod of thanks, no words needed. To Samuel, it was a thread, fragile but real, proof that kindness could still bridge what hate had burned. Later, when the children had gone to bed, Samuel sat by the fire. The three women whispered at the table in words he could not follow. Finally, the English speaker turned to him. "Why here? Why us?" Her voice was low, edged with mistrust. Samuel leaned back, eyes on the flames. "My children lost their mother 10 years ago. They need more than I can give alone. When I saw you, I knew you'd been taken against your will. I thought maybe together we could give each other a chance." Her eyes searched him, doubtful. A chance for what? He hesitated, firelight flickering over his face. To live different than this world expects. To be more than prisoners of loss and hate. The other women watched, their faces unreadable. The one with sorrow in her eyes looked away as though the words had cut too close. The tallest leaned forward, her voice sharp in her own tongue. Samuel could not understand, but the tone was clear enough. Warning, distrust, perhaps even threat. After a pause, the English speaker translated. "She says trust is not given. It is earned. If you lie, she will know." Samuel nodded once. Fair enough. The days that followed moved slow and uneasy. The women stayed close together, moving through the ranch like shadows. They worked, though carefully, as if testing the edges of their new world. Samuel's daughter hovered near, offering small gestures, showing them where the flour was kept, carrying water alongside them. His son kept his distance, his silence sharpened into hard suspicion. At night, Samuel heard the women whispering by the fire in their own language, voices carrying sorrow and strength. The town, meanwhile, had not forgotten. Neighbors passed by on horseback, slowing to stare. Rumors spread in the saloon that Samuel Carver had lost his senses, that he was hiding danger under his roof. One man swore he had seen the women scouting the land for an Apache raid. Another claimed they were witches who had cursed the ranch. Each tale was louder than the last, feeding a fire Samuel knew might one day come to his door. Yet inside those walls, something shifted. The youngest woman began to hum while she worked, soft tunes that floated through the house like old memories. One evening, Samuel's daughter hummed along, matching the tune with hesitant notes, and for a breath, the two shared a small smile. The tallest woman, the fiercest, eventually took to chopping wood beside Samuel. Her defiance gave way to practicality, her strength plain to see. And the English speaker, her eyes found Samuel's more often now. Not with trust, but with something less rigid than before. Questions lived there, waiting. By the week's end, the silence between them carried a new weight. Samuel gave them room, letting them settle as they willed. His daughter Emma followed them like a curious shadow, asking questions they could not answer. His son Jacob lingered near the shotgun that leaned against the wall, watchful as a hawk. On the 8th night, wind battered the shutters and the fire burned low. The three women spoke in their tongue, sitting close together. Samuel watched from his chair, sharpening a knife more from habit than need. The English speaker's eyes lifted at last, carrying the look of someone who had reached a decision. "My name," she said quietly. "It is Tia." The sound startled the others. Emma gasped. Jacob stiffened. Even Samuel froze, stone paused against steel. Tia gestured toward her companions. "This is Sonny," she said, pointing to the tallest. "And this is Nalin." The one with sorrow lowered her gaze, as if her name itself was too heavy to bear. Samuel nodded slowly. "Tia, Sonny, Nalin, I'm Samuel. These are my children, Jacob and Emma." His voice was steady, but inside he felt something shift. Names meant recognition. Names meant humanity, a first stone across the gap between them. Tia's next words came halting, her English rough but clear. "We were not captured in battle. We were taken." She touched her chest, then spread her hand in a circle. "We lived near the San Pedro River. Traders came. They brought whiskey. Men from town came too. We trusted wrong people. In the night they tied us." Her voice caught, the iron in her eyes trembling for the first time. Emma whispered, "That's terrible," but Jacob muttered low and sharp, "Or maybe that's just what they want us to believe." His words cut through the room. Samuel shot him a look that told him to hold his tongue. Yet Samuel himself felt the conflict stir. Every story had two sides. The land was steeped in blood. Still, as he watched Tia, he knew her words were not spun for his sake. Her truth sat heavy in the room. Sonny spoke then, her voice a storm in Apache. Tia translated, grim. "She says men from your town laughed when we were dragged through the street. They spit at us. Called us animals." Samuel's jaw tightened. He had seen it at the auction. He had felt the sneers burn his back. "She's right," he admitted. "That's what they did. But I'm not them." At last Nalin lifted her eyes. Her English was broken, almost absent, but she whispered one word that carried more weight than any speech. "Why?" It was no longer the why of purchase. It was the why of mercy and of shelter. Samuel leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Because I know what it is to lose everything, and I won't raise my children to believe cruelty is the way of the world." His voice softened, unsteady for the first time. "My wife was killed by men not so different from the ones who dragged you here. My children watched their mother die. I've lived with that hole in my chest ever since. Maybe I can't fill it, but I can make sure no one else suffers under my roof," the fire hissed. Silence thickened. Tia translated for the others. Nalin turned away, but Sonny's gaze lingered on him. Fierce, though no longer only hostile. Something had shifted, though not enough to name. That night, after the children slept, Tia stayed by the fire with Samuel. The others lay curled in blankets, exhaustion etched across their faces. "Sonny does not trust you," Tia said quietly. "Nalin is broken inside. She lost her husband and child before they took us. She believes nothing good can come. And you?" Samuel asked. Tia studied him, the flames reflecting in her eyes. "I listen, I wait. I see your children. They are kind, like their mother must have been. Maybe there is truth in your words." Samuel looked into the fire, remembering Mary's laugh, her song for Emma as a baby. He swallowed hard. "There is truth, but truth doesn't heal overnight." "I know that." Days passed. Small cracks appeared in the silence. Tia taught Emma a few Apache words: water, bread, fire. Emma taught her English in return, laughing when Tia stumbled. Sonny kept her distance, but Samuel noticed her strength in labor, chopping wood, hauling water, mending the fence, as if work itself was armor. Nalin lingered by the window, staring toward horizons only she could see. One afternoon, while Samuel mended a saddle, he overheard Jacob mutter to Emma, "They'll turn on us." "Just wait," Emma snapped back, sharper than he expected. "They're not bad." "You just don't want to see it," Jacob scowled. But Samuel caught the uncertainty in his son's eyes. Fear, Samuel knew, was the root of his anger. Fear of losing what little they had left. That evening, around the table, Tia spoke again. "The men who sold us," she said carefully, "they will not stop. They see money and women like us. If they learn where we are, they may come." Her words chilled the room. Samuel met her gaze. "Then they'll find me standing in their way." For the first time, Tia's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Fragile acknowledgement. Seeds of trust sown in shadow. Still, Samuel knew shadows hid more than they revealed. Wounds lay buried, waiting to surface. Secrets never stayed quiet long in a land that demanded survival. The knock came at dawn, rattling the shutters. Samuel was already awake, lacing his boots by the hearth. He felt the weight of trouble before the sound, like a storm rolling in off the plains. Emma stirred in the loft. Jacob reached for the shotgun by his bed. The women sat up near the fire. Samuel raised a hand for silence and opened the door. Sheriff Amos Klene stood with 2 deputies, dust still clinging from their ride. The sheriff was a thick man, belly rounded from saloon whiskey, but his eyes were sharp and cold. He wasted no words. "Carver," he drawled. "You've got property that don't belong to you." Samuel's jaw tightened. "You're mistaken." Amos leaned on the frame, peering past Samuel into the dim house. His eyes fixed on the women, half hidden in shadow. "There they are. Escaped hostiles, taken under territorial authority. They belong to the marshal now, not you. Hand them over and we'll forget this foolishness." "They're not property," Samuel said, voice low and steady. The sheriff chuckled, as though humoring a child. "Everything's property in this town if it can be bought and sold. You paid $6, didn't you? Call it what you want. The law calls them fugitives. And I enforce the law." Behind Samuel, Tia stepped forward, her English cut sharp. "We are not fugitives. We were stolen," one deputy spat in the dirt. "Hear that?" Speaks English like a preacher's daughter. "Clever, Sheriff." "Dangerous, too." Samuel blocked the doorway with his body, hand resting near the revolver at his hip. "You're not taking them." The sheriff's smile faded. His voice turned hard. "You don't want to cross me, Carver. Folks already say you've lost your mind. Harboring savages, risking your own children. You give them up now and we'll call it square. Refuse." He let the words hang, heavy as iron. Jacob, brash with youth, leaned forward from behind his father. "You can't just take people like cattle," the sheriff smirked. "Keep talking like that, boy, and you'll end up 6 feet under same as your ma." The insult struck like a slap. Samuel's hand twitched near his revolver, but he held it back. A fight now would bring more deputies, more trouble than he could stand. He needed time, not blood. "Give me until sundown," he said flat. "If you plan to drag people out of my home, you'll do it in daylight, where the whole town can see." The sheriff studied him, weighing the challenge. At last, he stepped back from the door. "Sundown, then. But mark me, Carver. When that sun sets, I'll ride back with enough men to burn this place to the ground if I have to. Think hard on what side you're on." They mounted and rode off, leaving dust in their wake. Samuel closed the door slow, the wood groaning under his grip. Silence filled the house, broken only by the fire's faint crackle. Emma's whisper broke it. "Papa, what do we do?" Samuel looked at each of them, his children, the three women, faces drawn with fear. "We stand," he said simply. "If we run, we'll be hunted. If we give in, we lose more than them. We lose who we are." Tia met his eyes. "You would fight your own lawman?" "I'd fight anyone who tries to drag my family in chains," Samuel said. The word family hung heavy, startling in its weight. Sunny folded her arms, less defiant than before. Nalin lowered her gaze, grief shadowing her face. And Tia, for the first time, let her eyes soften, not with suspicion, but with the faint edge of respect. Through the day they prepared. Samuel fixed the fence, checked traps along the ridge, and cleaned his rifle. Jacob followed him, his bravado tempered by the reality of what loomed. Emma stayed with the women, showing them where supplies were stored, how to bar the shutters, how to move through the house if fighting came. In quiet moments, Samuel found himself staring out the window, thinking of Mary. She had believed in goodness even when cruelty pressed close. What would she think of him now, standing against his own sheriff, risking his children's safety for 3 strangers? Yet Samuel knew the answer. Mary would have seen the women not as strangers, but as people worth defending. By sundown, the ranch grew still. Dust rose on the horizon, riders coming. The sound of hooves carried on the wind, heavy with menace. "They're here," Jacob said, his voice cracking with fear and excitement. Samuel gripped his rifle tighter. "Remember, stay low, protect each other. No one goes outside unless I say." The women stood behind him now, not in submission, but as allies bracing against the storm. Tia's voice was firm. "We will not go back. If they take us, we die fighting," Samuel nodded. "Then we stand together." Outside, torches flared as the sheriff and his men rode up, silhouettes dark against the burning horizon. Shouts rang out demanding surrender. Samuel stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, his figure framed by firelight from within. The line between law and justice blurred. Tonight would test which side he stood on. The standoff at sundown never broke into gunfire. Samuel held his ground, rifle steady, eyes locked with Sheriff Klene's across the torchlit yard. For a long, breathless moment, neither side moved. Horses stamped, torches hissed in the wind. Deputies muttered curses under their breath. At last, Amos spat and yanked his reins. "You're a damn fool, Carver." "This ain't over." They rode off into the dark, their threats trailing with the dust. When silence fell, it pressed heavier than gunfire. Inside, Samuel leaned his rifle against the wall and let out the breath he'd been holding. His children clung to him. The women watched close, the firelight deepening shadows across their faces. They had seen men stand tall before, but rarely for them. The days after stretched taut with tension, yet life demanded labor. Fences still needed mending. Cattle still needed feeding. Children still needed teaching. Samuel worked harder than ever. The women, once silent shadows, stepped in without asking. Sunny chopped wood at dawn, her axe striking with unyielding rhythm. Nalin tended the garden with Emma, her sorrow softening under the child's chatter. Tia stayed nearest Samuel, her sharp mind bridging words before they split into cracks. It was in these daily labors that boundaries blurred. Samuel caught himself watching Tia when she brushed back her hair, or when her eyes softened at Emma's laughter. Once, when their hands touched passing a bucket, a small spark jolted him, one he had not felt since Mary. He pulled back quick. Ashamed, but the ember lingered. At night, when work was done and the children slept, conversation grew deeper. Tia spoke more of her life before capture, the river valley, the sound of drums in winter ceremonies. Her voice carried the memory of her mother's songs into the night. Her words painted pictures Samuel had never seen, and he listened with the hunger of a man starved for more than silence. Sometimes Sunny added to her stories, her tone sharper, fierce with defiance against the world that had tried to chain her. Nalin spoke least, but when she did, sorrow cut through every word, leaving Samuel aching in ways he could not explain. One evening, as the fire burned low, Tia asked softly, "Do you still dream of her?" "Your wife?" The question struck deep. Samuel stared into the flames, feeling Mary's absence as sharp as the day she died. "Every night," he admitted. "Sometimes she's alive and I wake reaching for her. Sometimes I dream of the day she died. Either way, I wake alone. His voice broke at the end, but he did not look away. Alone is the hardest prison, Tia whispered. Their eyes held too long, and Samuel felt the air shift. He stood abruptly, muttering about the barn. Outside, beneath the stars, he pressed a hand to his chest, steadying a heart that had forgotten how to race. The children noticed changes too. Emma grew close to the women, especially Nalin, whose quiet gentleness eased her loneliness. Jacob resisted, but even he softened in small ways. One afternoon, he caught Sunny fixing the hinge of the chicken coop. She looked up with the faintest smile, and Jacob blinked, almost embarrassed. His suspicion faltered for just a breath, yet danger loomed. The sheriff had not returned, but whispers from town grew louder. Some said Carver had turned his ranch into a den of savages. Others called for vigilantes to finish what the law would not. Every rumor felt like a shadow creeping closer. But within those walls, another shadow grew brighter. Desire. One sleepless night, Samuel stepped outside and found Tia standing in the yard, her face lifted to the stars. She heard him but did not move. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Your land is quiet. Too quiet. I listen for drums, for voices. The silence. It feels like a weight." "I used to think the same," Samuel said. "After Mary passed, the silence near killed me." Tia turned, her eyes glimmering. "And now?" Samuel swallowed. "Now it feels less empty." Neither spoke. Then she brushed his hand with her fingertips. The touch was brief, but it struck like lightning. Samuel's breath caught. For a heartbeat, he let himself feel the ache of 10 years bending toward her. Then he stepped back, voice rough. "This is dangerous. For you, for me, for all of us." Tia's gaze held steady. "Love is always dangerous." The words haunted him long after she walked inside. Days bled into weeks. Emma laughed more freely. Jacob's suspicion eased. The women moved through the house like they belonged, and Samuel found himself smiling at small things again, something he had not done in years. But the world beyond Redemption Creek was not blind. The moment would come when whispers turned to action. The storm broke before dawn. For weeks, men had muttered in saloons, anger boiling over cards and whiskey. To them, Samuel was a traitor. To them, the women were property, stolen and in need of reclaiming. That gray morning, the ground shook with hooves before the sun broke the horizon. Samuel woke to the sound, reaching for his rifle before he was fully upright. Jacob stumbled to his side, wide-eyed. A dozen riders spread across the yard, torches blazing, shotguns glinting in the dim light. "Carver!" one shouted. "Step aside and hand them over. This ends tonight." Behind Samuel, the door opened. Sunny stepped out first, axe in hand, her dark eyes burning like fire. Nalin followed, silent but steady, her presence unyielding as stone. And Tia stood tall beside Samuel, unarmed but unafraid, her gaze locked on the riders like a hawk facing down dogs. Samuel's heart thundered, but his voice was steady. "These women are under my roof." "My protection." "You'll take them only over my dead body," the riders jeered. One fired a shot into the air. Horses reared. Dust swirled. The air thickened until it felt alive. Samuel raised his rifle, Jacob clutching his sleeve. For a terrible instant, it seemed the night would end in blood. Then a sound split the air, high, clear, and sharp as steel. A woman's voice cut through the standoff. Tia stepped forward, speaking in English, her tone steady across the yard. "We are not yours to take. We are not cattle. We are people. We choose where we belong." The words struck the mob silent. For some, fury burned hotter, but for others, hesitation cracked the anger. A few shifted in their saddles, muttering uneasily. Even hatred had limits when met with unflinching defiance. The standoff stretched until the first light of dawn painted the horizon. And in that fragile moment, the mob broke. One by one, riders cursed, spat, and turned their horses. Threats lingered, but their courage had thinned with the night. When the last hoofbeat faded, silence fell. The kind louder than gunfire. Inside, Samuel lowered his rifle, his hands trembling. Emma clung to Nalin. Jacob stared at Sunny with something close to awe, and Tia placed a steadying hand on Samuel's arm. For the first time, he did not pull away. Life after that night shifted. The town still whispered, but fewer dared act. Some neighbors kept their distance with fear, others with quiet respect. The ranch, once hollow with loneliness, now breathed with voices, with laughter, with the rhythm of work shared between them all. Seasons passed. What began as survival grew deeper. Emma called Nalin her second mother. Jacob, though stubborn, followed Sonny's lessons in the barn with a grudging respect. And Samuel. Samuel stopped fighting the pull that had bound him to Tia since that night under the stars. It was a quiet evening when he finally asked her. No speech, no crowd, only the two of them by the hearth, the children asleep above. Firelight flickered across their faces. Samuel held out a simple band of silver, rough and unpolished. "I don't know what the world will call us," he said. "I don't care. I only know this house feels whole with you in it. Will you stand with me as my wife?" Tia's eyes shone, not with surprise, but with calm certainty, as if she had chosen long before. She slid the band onto her finger and whispered, "Yes." Their marriage was not held in town, but on the ranch itself. A handful of trusted friends stood witness. No preacher, only vows spoken before fire and sky. The children laughed. Sonny and Nalin stood at Tia's side, and Samuel, for the first time in years, felt the weight of loneliness lift. Together, they built a life no one thought possible. Fields grew. Cattle multiplied. The house that once echoed with silence now rang with voices, different tongues, different histories woven into one story. They had been strangers, bound by circumstance, thrust into fire by hatred and prejudice. But through trial and sacrifice, they had become something more. Not captor and captive, not savior and saved. A family, and in that truth, forged in fire, they found not only survival, but happiness. Hard won, fragile yet real.